Well, we now have with us this morning Milord. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Mamedu, thank you very much for joining us. Well, Milord, let me start with you. Yes. Now, your panel, an 11-man panel that you led to review some of these recent public interest issues, arrived with specific reference to Rivers State. Okay. That, in fact, the Supreme Court would seem to have created this problem, in part, because the Supreme Court looked into the issue of defection, which was not even a direct issue, that was before it. So, and, your body was talking about accountability. I would like you to talk about, the accountability of the Supreme Court, their lordships, in this particular matter. And after Milord has spoken, Mr. Mamedu, I would like to come to you for us to give us a comprehensive view, because there were 3 cases that the Uwade-led panel looked into, to just give us some of the key recommendations and observations, in the cases involving Rivers, the ECOWAS court, and the other case involving APC and Rivers State Independent Electoral Commission. Milord.
Thank you very much. We reviewed 3 cases of public interest in the panel. One of them is the Rivers State Assembly matter. You will recall that the initial suit was before the Federal High Court, Abuja. That, if I remember, that was suit number 1163. And the question that arose was, okay, since the Assembly has only 4 members, will it be right that the federal government continues to give allocation through the central bank to Rivers State on the ground that the Assembly as constituted was not proper? The Federal High Court held the view, 1, that it has jurisdiction, and 2, that, well, a 4-man assembly cannot work, that therefore came to the conclusion that the federal government should stop appropriation to Rivers on the ground that there was no valid appropriation bill to maintain such practices. This matter went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal held first that, yes, in this matter, the Federal High Court has jurisdiction. That's equally right. And that the Rivers State government cannot now talk about a doctrine of necessity to uphold the idea to maintain their allocation on the ground that you recall that there was a previous matter before the State High Court on the legality of defection. That came to another panel of the Court of Appeal. And they said, no. State High Court, you don't have jurisdiction. Go back. So at the appropriation bill matter, the Court of Appeal too held the view that, well, since nothing has been done about your case, one panel of the Court of Appeal struck out the suit area. The situation, let's maintain the status quo. Your people are still in existence, so you don't need any doctrine of necessity. It was this same matter that now got to the Supreme Court as Appeal 1174, Cross Appeal 1174B, and other matters connected with it. Okay? Virtually, if you read the lead judgment of Agim, GSC, he agreed with the Court of Appeal that let's make issue about doctrine of necessity. You have not done anything about the case that was struck out. Maybe it's in another Federal High Court or whatever. Therefore, your assembly membership stands. You don't need necessity. Let it work that way. Okay? But the lead judgment formulated only one issue in the case, which was the issue of jurisdiction. In fact, the court says that in all these consolidated appeals, the only issue to be determined is the issue of whether Federal High Court has jurisdiction or not. Fine. And of course, they held in agreement with the Federal High Court and the Court of Appeal that the court has jurisdiction. If you stop at the lead judgment, you will think there is no conformity between the orders that was eventually made, which was very wide, go back, all this, with the idea of simply deciding appropriation bill. And we felt at one stage, when we got seized of the lead judgment, that you have left something, something is still at stake. What about the legality? Existence is different from legality. Have they defected or not? That is what you think with the lead judgment. But now part of the judgment of the Supreme Court was the contributory judgment of Justice Iwosuyeme, GSC, who actually, without being asked so to do, without formulating any issue on defection, so to say, decided what the public has been waiting for on the issue of the legality of the defection.
But can't the Supreme Court take an activist role, even when an issue is not before it, as we have seen in previous cases, then decide to be an activist court of law?
No.
But I've asked that, just to link the point about what President Tinubu did yesterday.
Yeah.
I've argued this morning that what President Tinubu did is an assault on the Constitution of Nigeria. What do you think? And also about judicial activism, whether it applies in the matter that your panel
Your first question first. I don't think it is right for any court to breach the position of the law. That judgment, that contributory judgment was not asked for. Of course, lawyers will say it's obiter. The question is that it has a larger issue, a problem of whether it has a binding effect. That's a very, very serious thing. Because in fact, for media, if you look at the media, you find out that some people are still contesting the legality in one other federal high court, I think Labour Party, as if the Supreme Court said nothing. That is the type of problem that will be created by that contributory judgment. Perhaps if they are stopped at the lead judgment and the others agreed, it will have been a different thing. But the question of determining the legality, whether they have done it rightly, and now they say, yes, they were just boasting. They never defected. That was legality. It was not right.
Tinubu dancing on the grave of the Constitution.
That is totally a different matter. If we talk about what it is, the law, as proposition of an is proposition, we will be able to say the law is dicey, because I listened to you earlier. The law is dicey. Nobody seems to know the limit of 305, Section 305, except it is properly interpreted. But clearly, it gives a lot of power for the National Assembly as check and balance to moderate, to modify, or do anything about such. I think the reliance of the Constitution for 305 is on the National Assembly. You can do anything you want with it. You may even reject it, you may modify it, because they talk about the details. That details is not really known. You referred earlier on to Section 188. Yes, Section 188 talks about how a governor can be removed, impeachment, sickness, etc. No one is sure that that precludes removal in a state of emergency. Like I said, that is for interpretation. But following the common trends, if we talk about an ought proposition, what is it that is ought to be? All the parties concerned are obliged to follow democratic principles, either in terms of interpretation or in terms of actions, because the Constitution expects that we'll be ruled and governed, having regards to democratic principles. Thank you very much.
Well, Mr. Mamedu, let's come to you quickly. A quick summary of the findings of the Justice Ouade-led panel, 11-man panel, on issues of accountability in the 3 cases that panel looked at.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruben. Good morning. Just to say that, first of all, when we talk about accountability, accountability is a major bane of our democracy. If you look at the principal-agent relationship, where you have the citizens as the principal and the government as the agent. The principal mandates the agent to take some certain steps, responsibility on its behalf. And having that in place, there are expectations that the agents are supposed to uphold, including what to do and what not to do. And if there are discrepancies, there are other institutions, when there are challenges, there are other institutions that can come in and mediate. That's where the judiciary comes to play. And that is why, for us, the judicial accountability is key, it's sacred, it's supposed to be independent. That's why it's independent. And that's where also the National Assembly is supposed to also come to play. They are supposed to play that check and balance to hold the executive accountable. So it's, and over the years, we have seen series of judgments. And recently you hear people talking about controversial judgments up to the Supreme Court level. Even recently we had the Plateau State judgment, the Imo State judgment. So all of those, the Plateau State judgment, of course, the judgment from the Supreme Court showed that the appeal court's ruling was not the right one, and that brought some level of controversy. So what we then did as ActionAid, how do we ensure that the level of accountability, citizens' involvement, and ownership of this process is promoted? So that was why we brought this team together. Of course, team of eminent, qualified, retired justice of Nigeria. We also had professors of political science, media experts, development experts, even lawyers in this team, looking at all of these issues. On the basis of that, we then say, let's pick some judgments that are of interest to the country, and we picked 3 of them. 2 were, interestingly, were around River State, the one that Milord has just spoken about, and the second one was around the local government judgment of River State. Then the third one was the ECOWAS judgment. So it's not just limited to the judgments from Nigeria. And for the ECOWAS judgment, which I will start from, it was basically around NSAS that says that the government erred in not respecting the rights of Nigerians to peaceful protest. So we have seen that degenerate over the years. We have gotten to a point where citizens are now told you cannot protest in public. You have to go to a stadium, an enclosed place for you to be able to do your protest. We have seen actions of the police, of the military being deployed, even the DSS also being involved in trying to stop citizens from protesting. So the ECOWAS judgment was quite clear. And secondly, ECOWAS judgment also said you need to pay some monies, some penalties, fees to some certain persons, those that were added to the judgment. But 9 months after, that has still not happened. So our recommendation was, of course, the federal government needs to obey the ECOWAS judgment. It's binding on Nigeria, so because we are signatory to that. So if we are signatory to it, that judgment is binding to us as a country, and we must respect it. Then we also looked at how do we ensure that involvement of police or other organs, security agencies, is left at the barest minimum or not allowed at all, except when necessary. But who define the necessity? How do you manage that? So we also looked at that. How do we make sure that the citizens are not, protests and all of that are not criminalized? And the ECOWAS judgment was clear around that. Then the issue of the other judgments, if you looked at the judgments that Milo just talked about, the judgments are not easy to read. So one of the function of this panel is to try and break down judgment for Nigerians to understand. People look at this judgment and they look very complicated, and you are reading the judgments and you are looking at several documents, but how do you make it simple enough? How do you make it short enough? How do you make it concise enough for citizens to read, understand it, and there are no contradictory issues within them, and if there are, it's our responsibility as a panel to point them out. So these are some of the recommendations that we came about. Of course, the judgment, we recognize all the good things, all the right things that were said in the judgment. We recognize all the positives that were done by the judgment, but the gaps that existed, we recognize them and we said, these are the recommendations. Ultimately, the citizens are supposed to hold both the executive and the judiciary accountable, and the legislative accountable, three arms of government accountable. They are all there as agents of the citizens, which is the principle here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know that, that we're still going to dissect a lot of things. It's just that because of our time, we're trying to get in as many things in as much as possible. Honorable Justice, sir, I just wanted to ask you, going back to the River State matter, because that's definitely on the minds of a lot of people, and a lot of, like I said earlier, legal minds. The NBA has released a statement. With regards to this appointment of a sole administrator for the state, the remit of his power in terms of regulations that will be passed on to the Federal Executive Council, what is the legality of that in terms of, in accordance to the Constitution, the law, can he, in this position, make regulations or law that's subject to the FEC, or should it be the responsibility of the National Assembly in this case?
Do not forget, when we refer to the speech of the head of state, he said he shall not make laws. The question which I think you have raised earlier while I was watching is whether the president said he can make regulations.
Yes.
The question is whether those regulations will be subject to the Federal Executive Council, which Dr. Abati said, of course, does not have power of lawmaking. You can equally say that regulation is not law. But more important is what I've said earlier. National Assembly has a fundamental role, a big role, because 305 just talk about details. Yes. That details is the National Assembly that needs to moderate it. And maybe we should just wait and see.
Well, they said they're sitting today, so we should what the outcome of that will be.
We should just wait.
Okay. So, Mamedu, I'll come to you on this. And thank you, and thanks to ActionAid for you guys doing this, putting your money in it, because I know it didn't come cheap. It cost a lot, putting your time and effort into it. Is there any way well-meaning Nigerians can continue to support ActionAid to be able to bring more, cases up like this? Because I know you have to have, you probably had a secretariat. You have to run it. This thing costs money. It's not cheap. To be able to get the likes of my dear retired justice, on the seat and everybody there, it's not cheap. How can Nigerians support ActionAid? Because this is a good venture. God bless ActionAid. This is a path to having sensible democracy in this country, not a demonstration of craze. So that's the first question. How can we support ActionAid to continue? And what other cases are you guys looking at? Are you going to look at the Imo case, for instance? Supreme Court judgment where third became first? Because that's another one we would like to look at and get opinions, about it. For you, sir, now that it has shown that the Supreme Court has become activist in nature, because that same case, like in the obituary you talked about, that the Supreme Court decided to take on by themselves, it's still a case pending in the Federal High Court.
That was exactly what I said.
Just recently, judgment has been reserved in that case.
Exactly.
But the Supreme Court have made finality over it.
Exactly.
So, what they say is this. You can go about the fallibility talk. It's not that because it's not fine because it's fallible. The truth is, with all of this recommendation, will the NJC now sit and look at these things again? Because that's why you are doing all of this. There needs to be accountability. With that same judgment of one activist in there, we have plunged the state into a state of emergency today. So cost judgments do matter. What's your take on that, sir? Let me come to Mamedu first and come to you afterwards. Mamedu, please. How can we all support ActionAid?
Okay, thank you very much. Just to say that the group of persons, group of Nigerians we are working with, to be fair, and they are just volunteering. if you, over the years, if you listen to valedictory sessions of some justices of the appeal court or the Supreme Court, some of them express their frustration on the system, what can happen, how they can change it and all that. Now, this is a little thing we are doing. And the truth is, all the justices, all the people that we have brought in, we can't say we are paying them, we can't pay them. So what we pay is just their cost of them to attend. We fly them in, we get their accommodation, we pay all of those costs. So but we are doing this in partnership with the Ford Foundation. And of course, we are looking at expanding it. We are looking at, so the next session, let me give you a practical instance. We intend to build this and make it big. We are going to make it a live program. We get our Rise to air it, where the debates, it's a robust session. We had like a 4-day session debating all of these things. And you have, of course, justices there. We're going to expand the panel to have more retired justices, even from the Supreme Court, in it, that, of course, will look at these issues and bring up the gap. This, for us, one thing it will do is it would make the judiciary know that people are watching, and will make them a bit more conscious of what judgments they are passing out. That is on one hand. So, of course, for people to come and support ActionAid, we have various platforms in our website on how you can support ActionAid for us to expand it. We need to make it live events. We need to get Nigerians in that room where those debates are happening. We need to get more lawyers in that room. We need to expand all of those. So we can do that. But in a twin action for us in ActionAid, beyond just the IJAP, we have another group called the Movement for the Transformation of Nigeria. It's again about accountability. So how do we ensure that there's accountability within the system? So Motion is working with over 100 organized groups, from market women to NBA to journalists, Farmers Association, all of those. So all of this group, and some, of course, some affiliates of NLC and all of that. And some of this group, over 100, we have currently about 30 million of those. And what we are doing is, how do we build citizens' consciousness to hold the government accountable? Our major responsibility as ActionAid is 2 major things. One is, how do we deal with issues of poverty? And 2, how do we deal with issues of injustice or social justice, as we may call it? So if we're dealing with those 2 things, accountability is central, holding the government accountable. The Constitution is quite clear on the role of the citizens in doing that. So Motion, 30 million persons in days to come, weeks to come, we're going to see more people holding and asking questions. If you come to the River State judgment, basically, so a couple of questions. Why is it that if we have to declare a state of emergency and put a sole administrator, why do we always go back to get a retired military person to be the head of the sole administrator? Is that our military mentality or the military hangover that we still have? Are they better managers? If I'm not conceding that River State needed to have a sole administrator, and in this situation, you don't actually need fire for fire. You need to look at peace. So you look at somebody that has a background on security and peace building. So it's not about warfare. It's not about, so if you go for it with warfare, recently we got to a point where our oil production dropped to as much as 400,000 barrels per day. And if we get to that, that is where the poor people would suffer the most. So those living in poverty, which is our constituency as ActionAid, which we take side from, they are the ones that will suffer the most, and we need to ensure that we don't get to that level.
Thank you so much, Robert.
The National Judicial Council is a quasi-judicial body. It does not raise, for that reason in particular, it does not raise complaints or petitions on its own. But at another level, in ActionAid, we have been able to say that, and we told the Parliament, we gave these papers to the National Assembly, that the NJC should be more proactive, in its affairs. In other words, not only to discipline when there are complaints, but also to monitor conflicting judgments, monitor inconsistencies in judgments, so that they are in an advisory capacity, they may reform, as it were, the judicial system. I think.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Just before you go, what will you advise the parties involved to do? For example, there's still an option to go to court for interested parties in Rivers State, is there not an option? 2, the National Assembly that will take the proclamation from the president.
Yeah.
What will you advise the National Assembly to do? Particularly as its powers under Section 11 will seem to have been taken away from it. What will you advise the National Assembly and the Rivers State persons involved in the face of this
difficult question
violation?
As for the National Assembly, they should listen to the public because the power is actually with them now. They can do and undo. If they feel that it is not right to appoint an administrator or it hasn't gotten to that stage, they may reject it. And that ends the matter. That ends the matter. It's more difficult to advise the parties in the Rivers State Assembly and all that. But let us go back to what the HARDSHIP has said, that in all these matters, in fact, we appealed that politicians and stakeholders should learn to settle themselves. If it wouldn't have gotten to that stage, it can still be done by some compromises. It can be done by some settlements rather than this stage. Thank you.
It can still be done by, as the president advised, Fubara stooping to conquer, which was the advice of the president. Thank you very much, my Lord.
I'm grateful.
Mr. Justice Owade, for joining us, and thank you.
And some
Mr.
people have talked about what the state and the response, in particular, by the people of Rivers State has been. Can you take us through events following that nationwide address and the military moving into Rivers State at the moment?
Again, thank you so much, Ayo. Yes, it's been, how should I describe it? It's been a very tense situation here since that declaration by Mr. President yesterday in his nationwide broadcast slamming emergency rule in Rivers State. No sooner that particular declaration was made, those who were still outside their homes were scampering, I should say, back to their respective destinations, because the next rumor in town was anything can happen, and that is expected. And so before the hours of 8:39 yesterday, the ever-busy streets of Port Harcourt in the evening were deserted. We all actually tried talking with 1 or 2 persons last night, but they said they can't do that except we'll do so in the comfort of their home. So in other words, yes, it has taken effect, and even as at this morning, a lot of Rivers residents have had to put out their appointments. 1, 2, 3 persons had said, look, we cannot allow our kids to go to school today because we need to, first of all, watch the situation. But as we hit the streets this morning, 1 or 2 persons are on the streets going about their normal chores, but of course not as they ordinarily would have done, because as they do, they wash their back. Yes, the government house has been taken over by the military, and you know that is expected, because if a state of emergency has been declared, Ayo, you don't expect the government house, that will be the cynosure of all eyes, not to be heavily guarded. And so that is what is happening there now. And people are going, the few who dare to come out are going about their normal businesses, but there is what I would describe as what looks like a palpable fear that anything might just happen. But the directive from the presidency had said that would not be. There is going to be security, and we are just hoping that that would be, because they say when the 2 elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Ayo.
All right, thank you, Dr.
Oh, Rufai.
Okay. Real quickly, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Please, I want you to give us the whereabouts, if you have it, of Governor Fubara as we speak. Some reports say that he was in his official residence when the state of emergency was declared. So, where is Governor Fubara? Is he still in that house, in his governor's quarters, in the government house? We also hear that there might be some armored personnel carriers around there. Has he been able to come out? We saw a message put out yesterday that was signed by him. Can you also confirm and authenticate that message? But where is Governor Fubara as we speak? And how is his family doing? Is his family safe?
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I think one cannot, as I do this live cross, I cannot really precisely put a finger on where the governor who is being asked to stay out of governance for the next 6 months is. You know what that means, my brother. He was supposed to be in the official quarters when that was done, but as soon as that declaration was made, nobody had access to him again. So all we hear in the streets of Port Harcourt today are just mere rumors and conjectures. Others, some are telling you, oh, as soon as that declaration was made, the governor and his immediate family were placed under house arrest. But nobody saw when that was done. But somebody this morning we were talking, and he said, is it not even better for the governor to be kept under house arrest for his own security? Because the situation here is not what one would want to describe as comfortable, especially for the governor who has been in the eye of the storm since this crisis broke in October 2023. And so no one can really precisely say where the governor is now. We try to make some underground investigation, getting in touch with 1 or 2 persons who before the declaration of emergency were very close to the governor. But of course, they maintained sealed lips, and that is understood because they will not want to give out information as to where the governor is, because anything can just happen. But what we can still maintain is that the governor is still in Port Harcourt City. But whether it's in government house, his official residence, or he is in another place, nobody can precisely confirm that right now as we speak. But just yesterday, the should I call him immediate part? He's still just suspended. The commissioner, I should say, for information and strategy, Joe Justin, did say that the governor, in all his undertakings between when he was sworn in and when this crisis broke, was done in the interest of the Rivers people. And so he called on Rivers people to maintain the peace, ensure that they don't take laws into their hand, that at the expiration of these first 6 months of the emergency rule, he's hopeful that the right thing will be done by all concerned. That was the official statement from the Commissioner for Information and Communications. And if a commissioner did release a statement, you know he should be speaking on behalf of the government that has just been suspended for the next 6 months.
The Commissioner of Information. The wrong thing has been done in Rivers State. And the whereabouts of the governor is important. I was trying to get you to pause in your analysis. I think it's important because in this country, once upon a time, a governor escaped in the boot of a car when, military forces assaulted government house under President Obasanjo's leadership. So I think Nigerians will be interested in knowing whether or not the government house in Rivers State has been taken over by federal forces on the orders of President Tinubu, because there have been footages showing, military officers moving into Rivers State in the direction of government house. Is government house surrounded, as we speak, by federal forces, the military?
Okay, Dr. Abati, yes, very important that we know the whereabouts of the governor, given that scenario you painted. But it is not clear now. For now, I'll still maintain where Governor Fubara is right now. But probably as the hours unfold today, we'll be able to say if the governor is in government house or wherever he is. As for your second question, if the military has taken over the government house, the main entrance to government house has been is being barricaded by the military as we speak now. Again, in the next couple of hours, we'll also be able to decipher if they've been able to take over the entire there, because it is quite a large expanse of land, the main gate and the back gate to government house. But both gates, I should say, have been taken over, probably to forestall any untoward situation, because the atmosphere here is not just the best. You've seen people, some are condemning, others are commending the president, yes, sir, for what has happened.
Manu, apart from government house, the front gate and the back gate already been barricaded by the military. Is there a military presence around the city? Have you seen evidence of that? Because you talked about the fears and the anxiety of the people living in the city of Port Harcourt. Is that because of military presence across the Garden City?
Yes, one, because of military presence, Dr. Abati. Then two, because of the fact that, before yesterday's declaration of a state of emergency, there have been several threats by some faceless militant groups who had said, look, we are going to blow open the pipes if the House of Assembly decides to go ahead to impeach the governor who is of the Ijaw extraction. So there's been this build-up to what eventually happened yesterday by way of the declaration of a state of emergency. As at this morning, the only spot that we saw the military was the main entrance into the army division here in Port Harcourt. But we are trying to see after what we can do after this live crossing now to comb other parts of the state to ascertain correctly if they are also in other parts of the state. But if that happens, I think that would not be a thing out of place, because when situations are like this, Dr. Abati, you know very well that the military would want to be in strategic positions of the city, especially, in order to forestall any breach of peace. Dr. Abati.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andy Manu, for your report this morning. We look forward to getting more updates as events emerge this morning. Thank you. We'll definitely look forward to speaking to you again in the course of the show later on today on the Arise News channel. But let me come back into the studio now. And Rufai, I'll start with you. A lot has happened. It's like less than 12 hours now, or a little over 12 hours now, and it seems like a day or a week in terms of political happenings in Nigeria. Your take on yesterday's nationwide address? There's been a lot of conversation, analysis by legal minds, by political analysts about the president's declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State. Your take on this?
Yesterday, I saw fairness at play. I saw a president that was not fair. That's what I saw yesterday. And I'm going to be hard with the truth today. I'm not saying this because of us. I'm saying this because of our democracy. It's time we stop making this a demonstration of grace. All the legal minds have spoken about it extensively. The last state of emergency had in this country, in fact, I think it was the National Assembly that called the attention of the president to that you don't need to suspend the governor. And it was kept in place. Most of the legal, analysis that have come out of Section 305 keeps faulting what the president has done. But you see, this case is peculiar because, please, you will humor me to think that this National Assembly will be able to call the president to order when they need to vote on it, when they need to get 2/3 on it. This rubber stamp National Assembly, this National Assembly that can't even investigate a case of sexual harassment, this National Assembly that is so high-handed in its own regard towards its own members. Is it this National Assembly? If you believe that this National Assembly will go ahead and make a strong footing and make a strong showing against President Tinubu, then you will be so gullible to think that osmosis is the name of a Turkish footballer. Not this National Assembly. Because they met yesterday with the president, the principal officers, before this was agreed. So it's a political ploy. Coming to the part of unfairness, I saw a lot of half-truths in the president's speech yesterday. Fubara has not made attempts to ensure that the Supreme Court ruling was implemented, but we saw when he went to the House, we saw the game the legislature in Rivers State had been playing. We saw those games, But the president was not fair in the first place because he took sides with Wike. And that's why the likes of Atedo Peter started asking, is there anything more between President Tinubu and Wike this morning? He can't call a spade a spade. He can't call Wike to order. The same President Tinubu did not see where Wike was threatening the Ijaw ethnic nationality and say, what would they do? The same President Tinubu didn't see all of this. But anyway, what do I expect? It's under President Tinubu's watch that we had 2 speakers in Lagos. It's under President Tinubu's watch we had a disarray in Osun State House of Assembly. You've had political suicides everywhere. But in all of this, he heaped all of the blame on Fubara when we know the real actors in this matter. And like Ebon Adegboruwa was saying this morning, it was part of a grand ploy. Let's call a spade a spade. It was part of a grand ploy. The idea was to remove Fubara in the first place. So they had looked for ways. Why was it that all of a sudden, it was yesterday that they served impeachment notice, that they wrote out the things Fubara had done, and then the president read out the state of emergency. And when you check the state of emergency speech, most of the things enunciated in the state of emergency speech were the things the lawmakers had enunciated in Rivers. So why did it happen all of a sudden? Fela sang a song many years ago. He called it Power Show. I open my eyes and I see for my country. Power show. But please, people that do the power show must remember power is transient. No matter, even if you do 8 years, it will not be there forever. Isn't it shocking that the same president that condemned state of emergency, that was a hero then, has now reneged on everything he condemns?
All right.
It's a sad day for democracy.
All right, Dr. Bati.
Okay, very quickly. Let me first come in from an interpretation of the Constitution, which the president himself highlighted. He said he was acting within the purview of Section 305 of the Constitution. Section 305 of the Constitution explains the circumstances under which the president shall declare a state of emergency. And the conditions are properly stated. If the country is facing a threat of war or imminent war, is Nigeria facing the threat of war in Rivers State? That's one question. It also talks about, a situation whereby something could happen in any part of the federation where, Nigeria could find itself in a chaotic situation. The president is required to act. Number 3, where the governor in that particular state does not immediately respond, to the crisis situation and does not approach the president to act in the national interest. So those conditions are properly spelled out. However, that same Section 305 says that the president, will give a proclamation which will be gazetted, and then will go to the National Assembly, and the National Assembly, if it's in session within, 48 hours, would act. If it's in recess, within 10 days, will act. If the National Assembly does not consider that particular proclamation, gazetted proclamation, valid, then it will vote otherwise. 2/3 majority of the 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And if that happens, the decision is abated. Okay? Now, the other relevant portion of the Constitution is Section 188. Section 188 of the Constitution spells out how a governor can be removed from office. A governor cannot be removed from office by the proclamation of the President of Nigeria. It can only be removed if there is gross misconduct, as put as an allegation by the House of Assembly, and then the CJ is advised to form a panel of reasonable people, people of distinguished qualities in the state. And if that panel now decides within the purview of Section 188 that those allegations are wrong, that puts an end to that process. Who advised the president? The people who advise the president must be called to order. Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, is a very distinguished lawyer. I don't understand how Lateef Fagbemi SAN arrived at this advice. And I also say that retired Vice Admiral Ibokete Ibas, if he's a patriot and a citizen, he must reject this appointment, making him sole administrator of Rivers State, because it is a wrong appointment and his own integrity has been called to order. Whatever may be the motivations, he must act as a citizen and issue a statement forthwith to say that he will not be party to the violation of the Constitution. Now, what argument are they putting up? It has been said that, oh, Obasanjo did this when he was president. After all, he removed Dariye in Plateau, he removed Fayose in the kitchen. Look, at that time, Akinolu Jimi, SAN, who was Attorney General, was relying, I think, on the 1960 Constitution. The explanation that he offered that the 1960 Constitution and the emergency, the Declaration of State Emergency Act of 1961 allowed the federal government to remove a governor or remove a legislature. Now, it was wrong. Because at the time he was making that statement, with due respect, the operative law in Nigeria was, either it was the 1999 Constitution. So Akinolu Jimi saying it was 1960 Constitution, 1961 Declaration of Emergency Act, was just using political expediency to justify the illegality that President Obasanjo engaged in. And people who are quoting the Obasanjo president must realize that an armed robber cannot say that because one armed robber got away with it, so you also have a right to commit armed robbery. That is wrong. The second point that I would like to make, again with due respect, is that people have been referring to the Jonathan period, that Jonathan declared state of emergency in about 3 states of the Federation, Adamawa, Borno, I think Yobe. Now, that argument has been settled by Mohammed Bello Adoke, who was Attorney General of that time, in his book, The Burden of Service. I don't remember the specific pages. But as a reviewer of that book, I reviewed that book on the back page of this. I recall that Mohammed Adoke argued that there's nowhere in the Constitution that the president is empowered, that's 1999 Constitution, that the president is empowered to remove a sitting governor or remove a sitting House of Assembly. And that was why under President Jonathan, no governor was removed, no deputy governor was removed, no state House of Assembly was sacked, no local government chairman was even removed in those 3 states. So the people who are just making argument about president, they are speaking out of ignorance. And I recommend Adoke's book for them to find that explanation. Having dealt with the legal framework of this conundrum in which we have found ourselves, yesterday I wrote a piece, back page of this day newspaper, in which I said President Tinubu should take charge of the situation in Rivers. I was reminding him of the crisis in the Western region, First Republic, the Wild Wild West, 1962, the crisis between Adigbenro and Akintola, and when Tafawa Balewa, appointed Majekudume as sole administrator. The 1960 Constitution allowed Tafawa Balewa to so act. But I said President Tinubu should not allow history to repeat itself. I expected that in intervening, even despite the fact that there have been violations of the pipelines and Joy Youth Congress is saying they will sabotage Nigeria economically, I expected President Tinubu to still act within the province of the law. And that's why I say he has been misadvised. And I think Vice Admiral Ibok Ite-Ibas should not take this appointment. I also think that the National Assembly should reject this proclamation if it is so presented, and not act within its reputation as a rubber stamp National Assembly. The president should be properly advised so that we can have peace in this environment?
That's the watchword, peace, and that's why the president has said he has had to take this very difficult decision to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State in the interest of peace and to promote law and order. In terms of the National Assembly, they have said that they'll be meeting today to deliberate and to whether pass the motion or not. All eyes will then be on the opposition. We have to remember that the APC has a very small margin of majority in both houses, in the House of Representatives and the Senate. So let's see if we will now hear the voice of the opposition loudly as their leaders have come out, including Atiku Abubakar, Chief Bode George, the PDP in itself have come out to condemn this move by the president, saying that it is unconstitutional. Absolutely. The NBA has also written an initial response to the declaration of a state of emergency, also saying that it is unconstitutional, citing the reasons given in Section 305 of the Constitution as not having been met, questioning whether or not River State is in that state where it would fit into the areas that have been determined for declaration of a state of emergency by the president. But I think, just to clarify something, Dr. Bati, Vice Admiral Ibas, the president had said that he would not be able to make laws, but regulations that will be subject to FEC approval. So it's the regulations that Vice Admiral Ibas makes that will be subject to approval by the FEC.
No, the FEC is not a lawmaking body.
Yeah. So
and the president is biased.
Yeah, well, okay.
I
so
agree
let me
with that
talk
view,
about bias.
that is
Yes.
biased.
So in terms of being biased, yesterday, a number of people criticized that speech by the president, saying that, unfortunately, a lot of the things he said, and I think Rufai already alluded to this, were put at the doorstep of the governor. That's Governor Fubara, saying that despite efforts he had made to try to bring parties together, Fubara hadn't made any attempts. But the statement released by Governor Fubara this morning actually speaks contrary to that. And we have followed very closely the crisis in Rivers State since 2023, just a few months after Governor Fubara was sworn into office, where at many points, when that meeting was had between him and the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, he had gone ahead to begin to implement some of the agreements. But then he said that the lawmakers reneged on the agreement, and so he had to pull back as well. With the Supreme Court ruling, which the president also cited, Governor Fubara had also demonstrated good faith in the way that he had wanted to dialogue. We saw the letter we cited the letter that he had written to invite the lawmakers, which they refused and said he should come to them. He went to the complex, and they said they were meeting with him. In fact, they said many of his attempts at some form of resolution had been rebuffed a number of times by the lawmakers. So it's interesting that the president did not in any way acknowledge any of those things, rather said, quoting the Supreme Court, that he was a despot. And I thought that was quite a strong word to use for the governor. Despot, a tyrant, a dictator, an authoritarian, by collapsing the House of Assembly in the state. That doesn't seem to fit with the governor's person in terms of the actions he has taken so far in trying to resolve. He also said that since the demolition of the House of Assembly, nothing has been done to either begin to rebuild, and it had exacerbated the issue. Well, the truth is that the governor provided a temporary structure for the lawmakers to meet and deliberate until they were able to build or to rebuild the State House of Assembly. So a number of things there seem to make it seem or prove that the president was quite partisan. Now, as we've often talked about, it's difficult to play in a space or arbitrate when you're already taking a side. Not one mention of the role that the minister of the FCT played in all of this. Beyond that, what a number of people have opined, and I do agree with this, is that a lot of calls have been made to the president to rein in his minister. That would have been easier than if instituting or going with the Section 305, because the minister serves at the pleasure of the president. He's an appointee of the president. He's not an elected official. Just by reining him in, we might not have gotten to this point where the level of crisis in Rivers State has reached this height. And so the question again this morning is that, having made this announcement, what will he then say about the actions of his own minister, who has been a chief instigator in what has been happening in Rivers State? Beyond that is also talk about the fact that this sets a bad precedent. I used the word militarized democracy a few days ago with regards to what we seem to be practicing in Nigeria today. What we do not want to fall into is a democracy where it seems like a lot of things are happening unilaterally, and there doesn't seem to be a respect for the rule of law, especially the Constitution, which is the ground norm for all that you do is the holy grail for what happens in this nation called Nigeria. If the president himself is seen to be violating the conditions of the Constitution, it doesn't all go well at all for this democracy or for Nigeria as a nation. And so the conversation still continues. Yes.
Ayo, if Nigeria suddenly faces a threat and there's some chaos affecting the country, would the president remove himself from office?
Exactly. So if you can suspend the government,
will he declare a state of emergency that removes himself from office and appoint a sole administrator to take over Nigeria?
Yes,
Mutatis mutandis.
Yes,
I think the logic
If you
works.
can suspend the election.